Happy Manga Monday! We are back with another first volume manga reviews video, and this time we are talking sci-fi. Sci-fi thrillers for the most part, some action adventure vibes, and one outlier, which is a sci-fi space slice of life story. And yeah, so I figured let's just get that little outlier one out of the way. But that is Captain Momo's Secret Base. So I must confess, I am really not a sci-fi space girly. I'm more the sci-fi dystopian, like sci-fi kind of more futuristic. So yeah, but I did have this space themed sweatshirt I thought I would don for this video. It was my dad's before he gave it to me because it got like too small for him to comfortably wear. So yeah, it felt very fitting for the video, giving the vibes. But yeah, anyways, so this first volume is definitely sci-fi in space, if you couldn't tell by this beautiful cover. But it is by Kenji Tsuruta, who worked on Emanon, which is probably their most well-known manga series, but also Wandering Island, which has a lot in common with this one, with a spunky, adventurous, smart girl and her cat companion. You can see that there's some overlaying themes that this mangaka enjoys writing about, and they also include a lot of nudity. Just gonna forewarn anybody out there curious about this title. I don't think it's done in a sexualizing manner. There is a voyeurism about it though that like could turn people off, and it was still a bit much for me, and I don't think of myself as like a prude or anything. But trying to like rationalize the choice, I guess, I could see if you were alone, which Momo essentially is, captaining this spaceship for days and months on end, why bother putting on clothes, I guess? Yeah, I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, is it necessary for the plot? Or was this just a personal choice? You know what I mean? But yeah, I will say I think the inclusion of her cat companion, Grandpa John, is one of the sweetest, most just adorable, like, inclusions. I love that they do tend to pair up their heroines with a cat, because I am a crazy cat lady, okay? I admit it. And I like that they have someone to like bounce things off of and have interactions with, while she is essentially alone for like 99% of this, with like just transmitted communications, giving her like a 1% human interaction in there. But yeah, this is a very space slice of life. We follow Momo in her day-to-day life. We find out she's very intelligent and she's very good at making modifications on technology. She modifies this invention that kind of rehydrates your food for you to actually like provide books for her. And I think that's really cool, and something that I would definitely try to do, because I would be bored in space. I would need lots of books. She also is always stuck having to figure out how to get energy from different sources, because the space shuttle is only given the bare minimum of necessities to get her from point A to point B. Her company is very shoddy and kind of just doesn't seem to care about their captains that they send all alone into space, and they don't even like care if they make it alive to their end destination, essentially. So she has to be really quick on her feet and uses her ingenuity to get her out of these tight fixes, and she avoids, you know, death and also the tedium and boredom of being alone in a spacecraft for so long. And yeah, so I thought the first volume was pretty good. I picked it up obviously because of the mangaka. I think their concepts and way of writing and even their art style in general just all really speak to me and intrigue me, and so I'm always curious and always picking up their work. So that's why I picked up this one. But yeah, that'll do it for this sci-fi space slice of life story. And now we shall move on to Fool Night. So Fool Night. I was a little harsh on this one in my initial ratings of it. I felt like they wanted to get me to really feel something and really connect with what was going on in an emotional way, and I just didn't. And it felt try hard, I guess is what I'm saying. But having had some space from it for a little while, I actually really feel like the characters and the plot itself stuck with me more than I initially thought it was going to. I'm more eager and more apt to pick up the second volume than I thought I was going to be. So the plot of this one, Earth in the distant future, is covered by thick clouds and the sun no longer shines. Since that is the case, plants have now withered away and the oxygen is quite thin to essentially fight extinction of the human population. Because of this, humans have developed a technology that essentially turns humans into plants. You get the dystopia vibes? And our protagonist here, Toshiro Kamiya, is pondering the questions of the ethical nature of this practice and what it means to do this to himself when he is faced with the difficult choice to save his family or save himself. I think this is the crux of my problem with when I first read Fool Night. I didn't like why he made the decision, I guess, is how I should vocalize that. I understand that we want to make him make the decision because the rest of the plot hinges on him choosing to get this procedure done on him called transfloration. Before you undergo full transfloration and become a plant essentially and lose like your basic human abilities, it's like a year or two, I think. In exchange for that, you get a hefty sum of money. So Kamiya decides to make this really extreme decision for himself and undergo this transformation or transfloration, whatever. And I have two extreme, like, big problems with it, which I think tainted the rest of my reading of the first volume. One, we see his family situation. Why couldn't it be a nice family situation and make us feel actually compassionate, sympathetic, and like, oh, I understand he's in a tight spot, his family is suffering. But no, his mother seems to be out of her mind. I'm not gonna go into it because I don't remember exactly the details. She's not nice though. Bottom line, whether it's mental health reasons or addiction reasons or both, it felt like kind of, she's abusive. She's horrible. Why are you doing this for her? Essentially, like, she doesn't do anything for you. She doesn't do anything for herself. She doesn't even seem to work, and she just wants your money. And oh my God, she's terrible. So I just had an issue with, like, you are not making this a sympathetic situation. And secondly, he ends up getting robbed. And so the whole thing is useless and pointless because he doesn't get any of the money. And so then he ends up taking a job with the research side of this transfloration experimentation science-y group, which it just felt so manufactured. And that was my problem with it. It's like, you don't make the character's plight or anything sympathetic about it. We get like the smallest of flashbacks to Kamiya's childhood and the girl that he knew from grade school and was friends with, and that is now working for the Transfloration Science Research Center thing in the present day. So they meet up again and stuff when he goes through this process. So we get like a little bit of peek, but we don't get a peek into his home life. We don't see anything that would make us feel like he made this choice for the right reasons or like for good reasons. Like, I hate to say that because I know family is family to some people, but like, dude, cut your losses and run. Just get out of Dodge. Like, it's not worth it. But between that, and then him getting his money stolen from him, which why would you just give the patients like a big bag of cash and like not transfer it? Like, we're living in the future here, Huns. Like, what? Unless he decided to take it all out of the bank. But it was idiotic, which is my second issue with this main character being kind of idiotic. All it felt like for the sake of advancing the plot to get to the point where he does the procedure and then he has no money. So then he ends up helping the research team because he tells them, hey, I can like hear the plants talking and stuff, kind of. And the research obviously is like, this is fascinating. And there's obviously like this bigger picture of like trying to like discover more to this world and get some answers on certain things. Like, so you can tell there's a bigger mystery afoot. There's like more to the transfloration process or the beginning of it or what have you. But it just felt too manufactured. So yeah, that the execution of the first half of this volume was the issue for me and why I wasn't like really on board for it. I really hope in volume 2 they flesh out a bit more of Kamiya's past, his home life, really like kind of make us feel for him, feel for his plight, give us more of an emotional connection with him and not just look at him like an idiot. Because that's how I'm looking at him right now. I'm side-eyeing you and I'm thinking idiot in big red letters. But yeah, it just felt contrived. That's my major issue of the first volume, though I think it's a really interesting concept. So I'm on the fence with this one. But like I said, it stuck with me enough that I am curious and want to pick up the volume. I think it comes out sometime in September. It might even have come out by now. I don't know whether I'll pick it up this month or not, but it's definitely on my mind to pick it up and just see how volume 2 deals with this and if it can help improve the first volume retroactively, you know. But yeah, so I'm curious if anyone has picked up Fool Night, what you thought of it, because I definitely, as you could tell, had mixed feelings about this first volume. Next up is one that I came across like from a post or something and I had never heard of it, so I decided to pick it up. And it's called Tumi Project. And this is about a land once known as Japan that is now overrun by monsters and buried secrets after Japan was devastated by a nuclear war. So our protagonist here, Leon, is a French soldier who was falsely convicted of crimes and torn away from his family and handpicked for this mission to enter this wasteland that was formerly Japan and find a weapon known only by the codename Toratsugumi in exchange for his freedom. There's also other soldiers that are along on this mission with him, but the helicopter that they're all in gets attacked almost immediately. And so we only so far have met one other soldier that presumably has survived. There may be others that did, and they'll crop up. But I think, and this is my personal feelings, I think it would have been better with just him as going it alone. I don't really love the inclusion of the other soldier that made it, and I feel bad for saying that. He just feels so like just there for a simply comedic purpose. I tend to not like them. There's always exceptions like Donkey and Shrek. I love Donkey. He's purely a comedic sidekick. But yeah, just so far by the end of the first book, I'd say that was my major issue with it. So where the other one was the idiocy of our main character, this one is the annoyance of a secondary character. But yeah, there's interesting things going on. There's these weird animal-ish hybrids, creatures that seem to have a basic level of intelligence and scary strengths and abilities that these two are now up against, including a half-human girl who swoops in to save Leon for purposes unknown. Who is she? Why is she helping him? They can't really communicate. So I think it's interesting, and that alone could have been interesting, just trying to focus on these two and not the inclusion of the sidekick comedic relief character. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out as it goes on. I am, again, curious. I do love what they've done with Japan. I am just, which is why I picked this up to begin with. I saw some illustration art of the inside of it, and I was immediately like, oh yeah, I love that vibe of the city in decay, of the trees growing out of skyscrapers, like, mwah, chef's kiss. It's something that just tickles my fancy. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's why I started Alice in Borderland, because I saw that. I love it. I don't know why. I love the juxtaposition of the earth and the forest taking over the human-made constructs. It's, yeah, it's A+. So I will probably continue it because of that. I love the illustration, the artwork. It's just very, that post-apocalyptic Japan is so interesting to me. And I do want to know more about Leon and the government and why he was falsely accused and sent on this mission. Like, is there more to it and stuff? So there's some mystery to it that I think is compelling enough to warrant me picking up the second volume. And of course, that beautiful atmosphere, the vibes. I'm curious if anyone else has read this one, picked this one up, because I literally, it has a couple volumes out and I had not heard about it until I recently just like came across a random like post for it on Insta or something. I don't know, it popped up somewhere. And yeah, I'm curious if you've read on, what you think of the series and all that jazz. Just no spoilers, of course, but let me know. Now we move on to the last two sci-fi reads that were my favorite two, hands down. And we'll start with the first one, and that is Ado. So I picked up Ado because the blurb on the back says, and I quote, "Strange powers and military conspiracies abound in this sci-fi action manga for fans of Akira." I love Akira. It's a sci-fi classic. If you haven't read it somehow, I totally recommend it. The movie's also great. It does not scratch the surface of the manga because it's a movie and the manga is like, I think it's like 6 or so volumes. So it definitely only takes like a little chunk of it, but it's also a really good movie on its own. But yeah, I recommend checking the manga out. If you like sci-fi at all, if you liked Ado, I think you'll definitely like Akira. There's just something very intriguing and mesmerizing about that story. And even though it's kind of got some crazy out there concepts, like in this one, it's great. And I'm hesitantly optimistic that Ado could be just as great. But let's get into it. So in the not too distant future, we meet Riko. Riko is a 19-year-old girl, and she is driving through anti-immigration protests and things that ring very sadly familiar to a lot of us, I'm sure, in a lot of parts of the world. But yeah, on her way to work, when she sees a boy about to be run over, she saves this young boy and finds herself reluctantly looking after him. She doesn't get much information out of him, only that his name is Ito. I think that's how we're gonna say. That's how I'm gonna say it, okay? I'm gonna go into it with confidence. Could be confidently wrong, but yeah, I'm sticking with it. So Ito is obviously not forthcoming with information. He's weird, you know, he's a weird little kid. He's sullen, he's kind of creepy almost. But he also has very like, like a childlike innocence. And I understand why she couldn't just leave him on his own, because he seems very lost, and he just gives off this vibe like, okay, I'm just gonna help you, okay? But then helping him, she ends up in the middle of this government conspiracy where, I mean, another very sci-fi trope is that the government has been experimenting on kids, essentially. We don't get all the nitty-gritty details, but there is this secret base. There is other kids, and they all have these interesting powers. Somehow it has to do with plants, Question mark? We don't get lots and lots of details. It's very much just like plunking you down in the middle, and then it's going to slowly weave in those more and more information, I'm sure, as it goes on. But all you need to know is that Ito here has escaped this secret base. The government people that know about it are tracking him, are trying to bring him in, bring him back to the base. Essentially, in the beginning, they, I believe, are trying to kill him, but then they want to bring him back to the base because he unleashes his true powers. I did read volume 2, and I will say that volume 2 is just a bit of a drop down from volume 1. I gave volume 1 5 stars out of 5. I thought it was a really solid first volume. It even brought me a little bit to tears. You know, there was a little bit tearing up. Won't deny it. In the end of the first volume, there is a confrontation, and Riko is in the middle of it. And because of this confrontation, I won't go into it. She is not in the second volume. Will she come back? I don't know. I just think her and Ito's relationship that was forming between them was, I think, the thing that was really driving the story forward for me and made me emotionally invested. And I just really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed Riko. And so her not being in the second volume, it just, just to do a Ross. But, you know, it just, it took it down a little bit for me. Not terribly, because I do think there's an inclusion of the kind of group of over-the-top sci-fi bad guys that I think is kind of fun. And I really like the fight that goes on in the second volume. I enjoyed what happened with that. But there wasn't as much action as the first volume. And then there wasn't this relationship between Ito and Riko. So I just think those two things kind of dropped it down. But I feel like the second volume is building towards more. So I have fingers crossed that it will continue to go back up in the third volume. Obviously, I haven't read that one at all yet. And yeah, I'll just have to wait and see. I didn't think the second volume was bad, don't get me wrong. I just think it was a bit of a downgrade from this first volume, from starting so strong. But yeah, I'm curious what you thought. I have high hopes for this series. It was one of my favorite reads, probably my favorite first volume read. Like if I just took just the first volume of this one, yeah, I really liked it. And I am excited to read more of it. I'm just, you know, a little bit nervous for the choices that were made in the second, but I'm hoping for the best. And the final volume I read was King in Limbo. So again, I gave this one 5 stars. It is, however, an omnibus, so it's already attached with the first and second volume, which is why I kind of felt justified in like checking the second volume of Ado out since I had it anyway. And I read the whole thing of this, which means I read the first and second volume of this one. And I will say, if looking at both the first and second volume, this was my favorite. So if we're looking at just the first volume, Ado was my favorite. If we're looking at first and second, this one was my favorite. I think King in Limbo is really interesting story-wise. It's got these two very like, oh my god, it's giving 90s buddy cop, reluctant buddy cop vibes, you know, where they like start off as like, I don't want to work with this guy. Oh, he's just sticking my boot. And then they're like, oh yeah, we're good, we're buds. It just gives me that vibe. Like they warm up to each other by the end of this first volume and care more about each other. And I'm just like, I love to see it. Do I kind of ship them as well? Maybe a little bit. Maybe a smidgen of shipping going on as well. But I don't think that's necessarily going to pay off for me. It's just something that I'm doing because I am a major BL lover. But yeah, I am curious how their relationship will play out. And I'm excited because it's complete at 3 omnibuses or 6 volumes. So it's a nice short sci-fi series. So we start 8 years after this sleeping sickness has struck the world. It's a pandemic of sorts that caused people to fall into a kind of coma, a sleep that they don't wake up from. And by diving into their minds. So they have these divers and companion pairs. The divers would dive into like the patient's subconscious and would kind of eradicate the sleeping sickness, which I think is very interesting to like have a sickness be able to be not by like medicine or like whatever, you know, like a traditional virus and stuff that we think of, but like that it was somehow hurting their brain in a way that they could like deep dive into your subconscious and like cure it that way. It's, I don't know, just that concept alone is fascinating to me. And then the companion is like kind of a lifeline. They're able to lucid dream and kind of be able to bring the diver back to reality with them. Otherwise, the diver would be stuck in the subconscious and essentially stuck in the sleeping sickness. In a sense, they would just never wake up again. So they need these pairings, which is how I was like talking about the buddy cop, because we have the reluctant protagonist, Petty Officer Adam Garfield, and he has been wounded by an explosive ordnance, whatever, and so he lost his leg and he's injured, and so he can't really like do active duty, but he needs money for his family, kind of like Fool's Night, only done way better, because he actually has a cute and loving and adorable family that I get sacrificing everything for. Protect them kids. But yeah, so he decides to, when the government approaches him with this offer of like, hey, you could be a companion to our biggest diver because you have a 97% compatibility score with them, and help us because we think the sleeping sickness is back, but we aren't going to tell the public yet. It's very hush hush, very government conspiracy vibes. But yeah, so essentially Adam ends up wanting to go meet the king. That's his like code name, or like his kind of given name, because he was so good at diving. He's like essentially like the hero of the sleeping sickness. He helped to cure it, but at the expense of some pretty personal price from his family. And so he is pretty traumatized. He doesn't really want to do this, and so the government essentially threatens him. Sounds about right. And Adam doesn't really want to go along with the threatening, so he keeps just trying to like, come on, let's do it for the greater good. He's like the cheery boy, the sunshine boy to the grumpy boy, the cold boy, you know. It's also just an adorable juxtaposition of personalities that goes really well together, and kind of why I feel that BL vibe, because I love grumpy sunshine BLs. But yeah, but anyway, they pair up, and so they dive into a subconscious, and they realize that this version, or at least King realizes this version is very similar yet very different from the version he previously experienced from the sleeping sickness, and he believes it's man-made. And so there's a huge conspiracy now, and they kind of go off in the second volume and investigate on their own. And I'm just like, ooh, love me some conspiracies, some government shady shit. I mean, the government's doing overtime being shady and evil and just, a menace. And I love these two boys. I think they're great. I think they complement each other really well. They're like foils for each other. I have no complaints. So yeah, I'm very eager to get the second and third volume of this one. They're more expensive because they're omnibuses, so we'll see when I get them. But I do think I want to get volume 2 and volume 3 together so I can just binge read the rest of the series. I very much enjoyed this first omnibus, and I'm looking forward to the rest. So I really hope that overall, as a complete series, it will not disappoint, because speaking of disappointing series, we'll be talking about them more next Monday. So I did make a video of beautiful covers of series that disappointed me. So I didn't plan to make another video with similar vibes so soon. But But I had an experience. I was disappointed recently, and so I need to talk about it. I need to vent about it. And so that's what next Monday's video is going to be. It's going to be series I really loved, or series that had really great beginnings, premises, starts to them. You know, started off great and then disappointed me in the execution of the ending, or the unfinished nature of the ending. And yeah, so I hope you will join me next week. If you haven't already, subscribe, turn on the notifications so you never miss a video from me. I so appreciate every subscriber, every like that you give. Please do like this video. I heard that the like button lights up like rainbow or something if I say it in a certain way, so I'm kind of hoping it happens, and that of course you will like this video. Please, it helps, and I really appreciate it, as well as every comment. So if you would be so kind as to comment if you read any of these first volumes and what you thought of them, or any other sci-fi type series that you would like to recommend me. I am really liking Heavenly Delusion so far, but yeah, if you have any other sci-fi you think that I might be interested in, please do recommend them to me below. And yeah, I hope to see you next time. So until then, bye!